Bathsheba was born into a family whose fate seemed intertwined with some of the most defining moments in Israel's history. Her father, Eliam, was one of King David's elite warriors, fearless men whose courage served as a shield for the kingdom. Her grandfather, Ahithophel, was one of the most respected advisors in the royal court. His words carried weight in the halls of power, where decisions shaped the destiny of nations. At that time, families like Bathsheba's lived between honor and the silent pressure of high expectations. Jerusalem was bustling. Every stone in its streets seemed to whisper stories of kings, conquests, and divine promises. It was in this atmosphere, surrounded by tales of the chosen people and the victories that placed Israel among the great nations, that Bathsheba grew up. She was likely a young woman with a restless spirit, a dreamer, yet fully aware of the responsibility carried in the blood that ran through her veins. As was common among women of her lineage, she married young to a righteous man, Uriah, also a loyal warrior of King David. They lived near the royal court, in a daily routine that oscillated between privilege and the risks of being so close to the center of power. Bathsheba's life seemed destined for quietness behind the scenes, but everything changed in a single day. It was a seemingly ordinary afternoon in Jerusalem. The sun cast a golden glow over the rooftops, and the palace pulsed with its intense routine. Advisors came and went. Soldiers announced news from the battlefield, and in the midst of it all, Bathsheba remained at home while her husband fought in war. The hot afternoon led her to seek relief in a bath, a quiet, intimate moment, and on that day, a decisive one, from the terrace of the palace. David walked, perhaps reflecting, perhaps seeking distraction. That was when he saw her, the shimmer of water on her skin, the serenity of her movements, the peace of a fleeting moment that seemed untouched by the kingdom's chaos. The vision overwhelmed the king in an uncontrollable way. David, accustomed to power and its temptations, did not resist. He sent for her to be brought to the palace. Messengers were sent discreetly. For Bathsheba, a royal summons was undeniable. One did not question the king's command. When she arrived at the palace, possibly filled with respect and confusion, she found herself in a different atmosphere. The grandeur of the corridors contrasted with an unusual silence, as if even the walls knew what was about to happen. David received her with kindness. He was charismatic, and his words were carefully chosen. But behind his gaze, there was something more, a flame that went beyond mere curiosity. He treated her as unique, special. Perhaps Bathsheba felt flattered, or perhaps intimidated. The fact remains that on that night, boundaries were crossed. The king and Uriah's wife gave in to desire, a brief encounter, yet laden with consequences. What was conceived that night soon became an unbearable secret. Bathsheba was pregnant. The news reached the king like a sudden blow, simple, direct, devastating. I am pregnant. David immediately understood that the mistake could not remain hidden for long. Uriah's honor, his loyalty, made the scandal even more severe. What would the king do now? Overcome with fear, David devised a plan. He summoned Uriah from the battlefield under the pretext of discussing the war's progress. When the warrior arrived, he suspected nothing. He was upright, honest. David then attempted to send him home to rest with Bathsheba, hoping it would seem that the child was his. But Uriah firmly refused. How can I rest, eat, and sleep with my wife while my fellow soldiers are on the field? Sleeping in tents, he answered, demonstrating incomparable honor. David insisted. He offered wine and a feast, hoping to weaken the warrior with drink so he would go home. But even then, Uriah did not yield. He slept among the palace guards. His loyalty, once a source of pride, now frustrated the king's plans. Desperate, David made a cruel decision. He wrote a letter, sealed with his own royal seal, and handed it to Uriah, who unknowingly carried his own death sentence. The message was clear. Place Uriah at the front lines of the fiercest battle. Then pull back. Leave him exposed so that he will die. Uriah, faithful to the end, delivered the letter to Joab, the army commander, without suspecting what he carried. The irony was bitter. The man betrayed by his king carried his own condemnation in his hands. In battle, Joab obeyed. Uriah was placed where the fighting was most intense, and the soldiers withdrew. Arrows streaked across the sky. Uriah fell, fearless, loyal, unaware of the treachery. When the news reached the palace, David received it with coldness. Perhaps he felt relief. Uriah was out of the way. The secret, supposedly, was safe. Then, with false serenity, he sent words of consolation to Joab, saying, "The sword, which seemed to devour everything in its path, spared neither the king nor the kingdom." David attempted to soften his guilt, as though trying to justify his tragedy with empty words after the mourning period. The loss of Uriah and the choices that led to it could not be erased so easily. Swiftly, David took Bathsheba as his wife, trying to cover his sin with a veil of normalcy. However, his actions did not go unnoticed in the eyes of God. Then the prophet Nathan was sent to the palace. He carried a direct message, like a precise arrow, aimed at confronting the king with the weight of his choices. When Nathan entered the palace, the air seemed charged with invisible tension. He was a respected man, known for speaking on behalf of God. David received him, likely with a smile of false tranquility, unaware of what was to come. However, Nathan did not begin with direct accusations. He started with a simple parable, a story that seemed harmless yet carried immense weight. There were two men in a city, Nathan began. One was rich, possessing many sheep and cattle. The other was poor and had only one lamb, which he loved as if it were his own daughter. She ate from his table, slept in his arms. She was all he had. One day, the rich man received a visitor. Instead of taking one of his many sheep, he took the poor man's only lamb to prepare a feast. As Nathan told the story, David listened attentively, his heart filled with indignation. When the tale ended, he exploded. "That rich man must die. He must repay 4 times what he has done, for he showed no mercy." For a moment, a heavy silence filled the air, and then Nathan looked directly at the king with a firmness that made David tremble. "You are that man," said the prophet, his words falling like thunder in the stillness. David stood frozen, as if each of Nathan's words were a blade cutting through his soul. The prophet then revealed the truth. God knew everything. He knew of David's sin with Bathsheba, of Uriah's death, and of the king's futile attempt to conceal the truth. God's judgment was clear. Consequences would come. Bathsheba's child would die, and the sword would never depart from David's house. Nathan's words shook David deeply. For the first time, he felt the full weight of his actions. The once indomitable king now found himself face to face with the harsh reality of his guilt. However, the pronouncement of judgment was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a painful journey. When David and Bathsheba's child was born, Nathan's prophecy began to unfold in a grim and unavoidable manner. The birth brought a mix of joy and fear to the palace, but happiness was fleeting. The baby fell gravely ill, and the weight of the prophecy loomed over all. Overcome with despair, David threw himself to the ground, fasting and praying. He neither ate nor slept, spending his days crying out to God, pleading for his child's life. Perhaps he believed that with enough repentance, the punishment could be reversed. Bathsheba, meanwhile, endured her own anguish, a pain that no one could fully understand. It was not just a fear of losing her child, but also the awareness that this suffering was a price for the sins she and David had committed. The days dragged on, and the royal household seemed immersed in a shadow that not even the golden ornaments of the throne could brighten. But relentlessly, the baby's illness prevailed and he passed away. When David's servants brought him the news, they expected him to fall into an even deeper sorrow. Yet, to their surprise, David rose, washed his face, changed his clothes, and went to the temple to worship God. The servants were bewildered. "Why, now that the child has died, do you act this way?" they asked. David responded with calm bitterness. "While he lived, I cried out to God, thinking perhaps he would have mercy. But now he is gone. I cannot bring him back. One day I will go to him, but he will not return to me." The devastating loss left deep scars, but also marked the beginning of a transformation in David's heart and Bathsheba's fate. God still had plans for her. When another son was born, he was not just a symbol of hope, but a living promise that even amid ruin, something new could arise. Solomon, God's chosen one, was destined to be much more than just a prince on David's throne. His birth brought an unexpected light to David and Bathsheba's palace. Unlike their first child, who had come into the world under the weight of divine judgment, Solomon was received from the beginning with a promise of redemption. When God, through the prophet Nathan, declared his love for the child, he even gave him a special name, Jedediah, meaning beloved of the Lord. It was as if Solomon carried within himself a new opportunity, not just for his parents, but for the entire kingdom. Bathsheba, having endured so much loss and uncertainty, found in Solomon a renewed purpose to move forward. She raised him with care, knowing that he was not just her son, but someone destined for greatness. Life in David's palace remained filled with intrigue and rivalry among his older sons, all vying for their place in the succession. Bathsheba, though one of David's wives, knew that securing Solomon's path to the throne would not be easy. As the years passed and David aged, speculation over his successor grew. Adonijah, one of the elder sons, believed the throne was rightfully his and began to act as if he were already king, hosting feasts, gathering allies, and building his power base. But Bathsheba did not remain idle. Determined to protect Solomon's future, she sought the help of the prophet Nathan, a loyal ally. Together, they devised a plan to ensure David fulfilled his promise to crown Solomon. In David's final days, Bathsheba approached him and reminded him of the words he had spoken, that Solomon was a successor chosen by God. Every word she uttered was carefully measured, a balance of respect and resolve. While the kingdom simmered with conspiracies, a crucial decision had to be made. Adonijah, with unwavering confidence, continued to act as though the throne was already his. He gathered powerful allies and hosted a grand banquet, inviting commanders, priests, and influential members of the court, solidifying his claim. To him, it was not just a celebration, it was a way to declare himself king. David, weakened by age, seemed increasingly detached from the affairs of the kingdom. But Bathsheba knew she had to act swiftly to secure her son's future. With Nathan's support, Bathsheba entered David's chambers, where he rested, aged and frail, yet still holding the authority of a king. In a calm but firm voice, she reminded David the promise he had made. "My lord, my king, you swore by the God of Israel that Solomon would be your successor. But now, Adonijah has declared himself king, and if this continues, Solomon and I will be treated as enemies once you are gone." There was emotion in her words, but also a carefully calculated strategy. She knew that despite his weakness, David would grasp the gravity of the moment. As she spoke, Nathan entered to confirm her words and emphasize the urgency of the situation. Listening to both of them, David regained a glimpse of the strength that had once made him a great leader. He made his decision, summoned his advisors, and gave clear orders. Solomon would be anointed king that very day. He would be placed on David's royal mule and led through Jerusalem, proclaimed before the entire people. When David's command spread, the palace erupted in both celebration and shock. Adonijah and his allies heard the triumphant cries echoing from the city, and suddenly, their planned feast turned into stunned silence. But for Bathsheba, that moment marked the beginning of her new position beside the throne. Solomon's rise was like a beam of light cutting through the shadows of conspiracy. With David's decree, Solomon was anointed king before the people, and the sound of trumpets rang through Jerusalem, a sign that God's will was being fulfilled. The young prince, now king, was welcomed with joy and acclaim. Even those who had supported Adonijah realized that resisting the new ruler meant opposing the divine plan. Bathsheba, having witnessed so many twists and turns in her life, now became the queen mother, a figure of immense importance and respect in the kingdom. Her role was not just to advise Solomon, but also to stand as a symbol of strength and redemption. Despite the scars of the past, she knew her duty was to ensure the stability of the kingdom and support her son in his great mission. From the very beginning of his reign, Solomon proved to be different. Above all else, he sought the wisdom of God. In a dream, when God appeared to him, Solomon did not ask for wealth or power, but for understanding to govern his people with justice. This request pleased God and reflected the legacy of wisdom that David and Bathsheba had instilled in him. Solomon's wisdom soon spread throughout the world, and his reign was marked by peace and prosperity like never before in Israel. Yet, even with the brilliance of this new era, the memories of the journey remain alive for Bathsheba. Every step she took in the palace seemed to echo her past. From the terrace where David had first seen her, the place where Nathan confronted the king, from the tears shed over the loss of her first child to the celebration of Solomon's coronation. Her story was intertwined with the history of Israel, a living testament to how, in his infinite wisdom, God can transform the darkest moments into something extraordinary. The story of Bathsheba is, above all, a story of transformation. She began as an ordinary woman, caught in events that could define her forever. Yet, what makes her journey so powerful is not just what happened to her, but who she became along the way. Bathsheba endured moments of pain and shame, but instead of being consumed by them, she found the strength to move forward and a greater purpose that would change Israel's history. Her life teaches us that no one is beyond redemption. Even in moments when she seemed like just a pawn in a game of power, God was working in her story, weaving something greater. Her position as Solomon's mother, the Queen Mother, and part of the lineage leading to Christ shows that God not only restores, but also uses even the most complicated moments of our lives to fulfill His plans. There's also a profound lesson about repentance and grace. Both Bathsheba and David had to face their choices and live with the consequences. But that was not the end. The pain of loss, especially of their first child, brought deep transformation into their lives. They learned that, despite human failures, God's love and mercy are stronger, no matter how far one has gone. He is able to bring redemption and new beginnings. Finally, Bathsheba shows us the power of perseverance and wisdom. She protected Solomon, fought for his future, and ensured that God's plan was fulfilled. Her story is a living example of how God uses imperfect people to accomplish great purposes. In the end, her life was not defined by mistakes but by grace, which transformed her into a pillar of strength and faith for the kingdom of Israel. Her journey invites us to reflect on how God can use our lives, even in the most difficult moments, for something far greater than we can imagine. If you enjoyed Bathsheba's story and want to continue following other stories of faith and overcoming adversity, don't forget to like this video, share it with loved ones, and of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together, let's explore more powerful lessons from the Bible